All right. Just going to build a quick CRUD app this morning. Good morning. Using Mongoose, MongoDB, and the latest version of Next. Get this set up now. I'm going to open directory on my desktop. And we're going to use the latest Nextjs version to set this up. Go to the terminal. We'll run the command npx create next app at latest. And for the project, I'm just going to use the recommended default settings, and we'll give it a moment or two to finish the installation. Alrighty, cool. So we have that installed. I think the next thing I'm going to do is update the package manager so that we can distinguish the specific package manager. And as I add more dependencies, I shouldn't run into any issues. But you know what? I think for right now, it should be okay. So let's just clean the app up a little bit. Go ahead and get it up and going. Make sure we don't have any issues. And then we'll go ahead and integrate Mongoose and MongoDB so that we can have a connection to the database, and we'll be using Mongoose to kind of help out with that. But first, just do some quick, simple cleanup. In the global.css, I'm going to just remove the default CSS and just add some specifics for the body, the root of the project to distinguish the height, the width, the text size, and to make sure that we don't have any overflow on the x-axis. Then we'll head to the page.tsx file and just remove the boiler starter code from Next. Update the text inside of the div with homepage. We'll remove the image import just to keep it clean. Then I'll go to the terminal and run the command to start the project, npm run dev. And it's going to start on localhost 3000. So we'll just minimize this and get it going. And looks good. We have home page on the screen. Perfect. So what I want to do now is establish a database cluster. And as I mentioned, I'll be using MongoDB to persist the data. So if you're following along and you don't have MongoDB or you're not familiar with it, just go to the website and you'll be prompted to sign in or sign up. If you already have an account, of course, click sign in, otherwise sign up. I just typically sign in with Google to keep it simple. And from there, you'll be redirected to your overview window for your most recent cluster if you have a cluster set up. Otherwise, you should be seeing the organizational view and it may be asking you to create a new project. So we'll just click on new project, and then from here we'll just name this project, and I'm just going to name it Next CRUD app. Close this out and click next. The permissions are currently defaulted to whomever you log in with. I'm not sharing this with anyone, so this will be just fine for me. So I'll just click create project. And we've successfully created a new project. Now it's time to set up a cluster. The free tier will be perfectly fine for this project. If you wanted to load some data from MongoDB, you're more than welcome to do so. You just click this button, but I don't need it. And it's going to automate the security setup. If you wish to name the cluster, you can do so there. We keep AWS as the provider, and I'm selecting the region that's closest to me. It should automatically default, but if not, just be sure to do so. And then from there, we'll just click create deployment. Now you have quite a bit of information here. I'm just going to go ahead and click copy for the password, and then we're going to click create database user. And the connection method we're going to use is the drivers for a native driver application, and we're using Node.js, so this is the approach we're using. And then we're going to install MongoDB as it suggests. So we'll go back to the terminal and we'll paste in npm install MongoDB. Then we will also need to install Mongoose, which is what we're using to communicate with the database from the project. So that'll be npm I mongoose. Perfect. And with the connection string already up on screen, we can go ahead and store this inside of a environment variable file that's going to give us the rights, if you will, to communicate with this specific cluster using the username created by or suggested by MongoDB, and also the password as well. So within the root of the project, we'll add a file named .env. And what we want to store within this file is the environment variable that is going to allow us to gain access to our specific cluster. The variable name that we're going to store this in is going to be mongodb underscore URI. So we'll add that now, mongodb underscore URI. And we'll just copy the connection string from the cluster that's listed, from the suggested string provided by MongoDB. We can close this file out and then we'll click done. We no longer need it. Okay, so we have the environment variable with the connection string stored within the .env file. Now let's go ahead and add a function that can run and check to see if we have a connection. If we do not, it will establish one. And if we do have a connection, it's going to leverage the currently established connection. Give me 1 second. All right, so within this lib directory I just created, I'm gonna add a file named db.ts. And we're just going to paste in this connection string. Basically what we're doing is we're importing mongoose and we're using this same, environment variable that we created or that we added to our .env file. And just to make sure I don't have any typos, I'm gonna copy it and we'll go back to .env. And I'm going to replace what I typed with what I just copied. Yes, it's the same, so we're good. And basically what this function is, it isn't anything you need to memorize, but just know that what it's doing is it's leveraging Mongoose to help interact with the connection. If there's no connection, it's going to establish one. And if there is a connection, it's going to just leverage what's already there. This is just going to make it easier for us to interact with MongoDB, or with the database throughout the project and various files. And this is what we'll use to establish that connection whenever we need to mutate or query data from the database. So this is absolutely perfect. So we'll just save this. All right, so with that established, the next thing I want to do is create the models that will give us the ability to organize and structure our data within the database. So within that lib directory, I'm gonna add a file named column. That's what I'm gonna name my models. Column model.ts. So within this file, as I mentioned, this is where we're going to structure the information that we're going to store within the database. 1 second. All right, so first we want to import mongoose, and we'll be leveraging document, schema, and types. This is going to just give us some additional options for mongoose to kind of help out with structuring the data, making sure we keep everything type safe. Then we're going to export the interface. Interface. We'll call this iColumn document. And we want to extend the document. And all I'm going to store is a title. This is for the database type itself. Now I'm going to export one for the UI. So this is going to be export interface I column, COLUMN. Interface. There we go. And I'm going to have a ID, which will be a string, and we'll store a title, which will be a string as well. And then now the actual model itself will go const column, and I'm gonna name this column schema, COLUMN, yep, schema. It's gonna be equal to new schema. We'll go I column document, yep. And within this, we're going to pass in a title, which will be, which will have a property of a string, and we're going to make this required. We'll set this to true. I need to turn those off, make it a little hard to see sometimes. All right, and that's the only field that I want the model to have. So then from here, we just need to export it so that we have access to it throughout the project. So we'll go export column is equal to mongoose dot models dot column, which is the name of the model that we currently have in this file. And if there isn't one that already exists, we're going to leverage mongoose dot model. And then from here, we need to pass in the I column document. And then we're going to either use column that already exists, or we're going to use the column schema to create one because it doesn't currently exist. So basically what this file is doing is just structuring the model that we have, that we're going to use to store the data within the database. And if we don't already have a column that already exists, we're going to establish one. Otherwise, we're going to use what we already have and leverage the title, which is what we'll be storing within the database for the column. So perfect. So with this, we're now ready to begin to interact with the database itself. And I think the first thing what we'll do is we'll establish the ability to create or add a model, which will be the first indicator to let us know that we do have a good connection to the database. So I like to leverage, there's a few ways that you can go about communicating with the database. Of course, APIs are tried and true, and typically what you'll use in most instances. But with Next, we have the ability to use hold on one second. But with Nextjs, we have the ability to use server actions. So that's what I want to leverage in this project is server actions to make things a little easier and more efficient as it relates to communicating with the database. So let's close this out. And I think the first thing we'll do is add the action that's going to create that mutation for us, the same way that you would do if this were a traditional backend. You'd probably start with your APIs. I like to start with my backend first. So in the lib directory, I'm going to create a file named actions.ts. And we'll need a few things within this file in order to bring it to life. First, we'll mark it as use server. just to let Next know that this is a server rendered file, and with the use server directive, it's going to give us access to it throughout the project and within client side files should we choose to do so. We'll bring in revalidate path for Nextjs. I think it is the one with the capital, yeah. Basically what this is going to do is refresh the data on the page that we have. Just refresh the data anytime we do any form of update. We want to revalidate what's on the server and in the database. Gives it a little bit of a real-time feel, but with the caching from Next, this is going to force Next to make a query and to give us the most up-to-date information. We'll certainly need the function that is established or created to interact with the database. So that's going to be the DB connect file that we set up just a moment ago, leveraging the connection string within the environment variable, and also a quick function to establish a connection to the database if one doesn't exist. And then finally, we're going to import the column, which is what we're going to use to create or store the data within the database. So the first action we're going to add is to create a column. And this is going to be a export async function. I'm just going to name it create column. Inside of this, we know we're using TypeScript, so we're going to pass in some form data. And that's going to be using the form data object. And then inside of the asynchronous function named create column, the first thing we need to do is establish the connection to the database. So we'll just add await db connect, which is what we are importing from the lib directory that we added earlier. All right. And then we want to capture the information from the form itself. So I'm going to create a const named title, because that's the only thing that we'll be passing from the front end to the back is a title. And this is going to be gathered from the form data. There it is. And we'll use the .get method to get this data. And we're going to be looking for the title. And this will be shared as a string, which is going to mirror the type that we use for the title field in the column. And then just for just to make sure that we are getting data, we're going to pass the question mark. And if we do, we want to make sure that we aren't getting blank fields to just store bad data in the database. So we'll use .trim to help with that. Now I'm just making this a simple CRUD project for right now. I'll come back and add additional security measures that you want to have in place if you want to deploy this project. But for right now, this is just a simple CRUD app just to get you going to show you how it works. So the first validation that I want, and we'll use more, I'll use more in an upcoming video. But for right now, if we don't get a title, we want to share something back with the user, letting them know that we didn't get a title, and you're not going to be able to create a column without a title being passed in. So we're just going to throw a new error back to the user saying invalid title. And then now if we do get a title, we want to await the connection to MongoDB and leverage the column schema to store the title. And we'll use the .create method, which is coming from mongoose. And I just want to pass in a title, because that's the only thing that we need to create this model, or excuse me, to create this schema. And then once it's created, we want to revalidate the data just to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information from the server. So I'll just save this file. And now we're in a position where we should be able to use this function in order to create a column. And where we'll use this is within our front end with the Nextjs app. So I'm gonna close out this action, go back into the root of the project, and we'll go to the page.tsx file. And for simplicity purposes, let's make sure that our tailwind is working properly. Red 300. All right, perfect. So we do see that it is working. I'm not going to worry about the style of it too much, but I was having some issues with my Tailwind plugin working properly, but I think it's good now. So cool. We'll just use Tailwind to kind of help with this height full, and just to yeah, this will be fine for right now. All right. So to keep it simple, let's just add a form, and I will come back and do the styling of the project later on. Let's just add a form and pass in the action with the input, submit it, and let's just make sure that it actually works. So within this div, we'll add a new div, and we'll give this a form. And inside of the form, we'll have a input. This input, just to make sure we don't forget anything, we're going to give it a type of text, a ID of title, and a name of title with a placeholder of title. Click save, and you can see it listed here on screen. And let's just move this over a little bit. So we'll give this a class name. I'm going to set the width to full. There's some padding on the, actually we could just do padding period of 4. Make it a little easier to see. And I'll add a H2 to say new column. Perfect. And we'll just give this a class name of font medium. Set the text to 2XL, and we'll make the text color neutral 500. Okay, so you can see the column indicator there on screen. So now all we need to do is add a button. We'll give this a type of submit. New column. And let's import the create column action that we just created. That's currently within the action file within the lib directory. So we'll go import create column. Sorry, I forgot the brackets, but VS Code came in clutch with the recommended suggestion. We'll bring in the create column function. And then now we'll just need to pass this into the form itself. And we'll go create column. Click save. So now if everything is correct, once we add a title, we should we'll click create, or we'll click new column, and it should immediately add the new column into the database. Although we're not displaying those columns right now, this should give us the ability to immediately add it, and with revalidate path, it's going to automatically revalidate the data. So let's test it out. first column. Right, so we've seen the rendering message at the bottom, and we don't have anything on screen. We didn't get any errors. We're not passing them back just yet either, but we didn't get any pushback from the UI. So let's just see, check our database to see if it actually took. So we'll go to the MongoDB cluster, and I'm just going to refresh the screen. We'll go to Browse Collections. We see we have the test database, which is the name of the database. We have the columns. And as you can see, we are storing, we have the column here in the database, name, title, and it has a ID that is provided by MongoDB. So that's perfect. So it appears that it is working. We have the connection established. So the true way to test this out is to query the database and display data in the UI just to show that it is working. So let's go ahead and work on that now. All right, so we'll create a function back in the lib directory inside of the action.ts file. Scroll down a little bit. We'll name this one, well, this will be get columns. This will be a export async function. We'll name this get columns. What's going on, my brother? How you doing, man? I appreciate you stopping by, saying hello this beautiful morning. All right, so inside of this function, we'll start by awaiting the connection to the database. Then we will use, we'll create a const named columns and set it equal to await column, which is the name of the organized data within the database. And we'll use the .find method from mongoose. And we'll pass save this, and then let's just return the columns, and we'll use json.parse, and we'll go json.stringify the data, and we're just going to pass in the columns. Just click save, and then now what this function is doing is giving us the ability to connect to the database first, which is what we're using this await DB connect for. We're creating a const named columns that's going to await and find all of the columns within the database. that match this or that fall within this model. And then we're just going to return them back to the browser in JSON so that it is easy for our UI to work with and display that data back to the user without so much configuration. So now we're ready to import this function back in the page.tsx file. I think we can just add it on to this, get columns. Let's save it. And then in order to run this function specifically, because we're not going to be the one establishing this, we want it to run every time this page loads, we'll need to mark this file as asynchronous. So we'll go export default async function just to let Next know that this is going to be awaiting a connection and it is a server rendered file. Obviously, if this were on the client side, we couldn't use await. We would use useEffect or some other approach to wait to get information back from the database, but this works in this approach. So now we just need to use this function get columns within the asynchronous function so that we can display the data back to the user. So we'll create a const name columns and set it equal to await get columns. Perfect. And then now, in order to use this, we just need to populate a little bit of JavaScript in order to run that function. I think under the form should be fine. So we'll go columns dot map, and we're going to map over all of these connections, and this is a JavaScript method. So we'll go column any, and then for each column we want to display something back to the user. So we'll go div first. We'll need to give it a key of column dot underscore ID, and I think we only did a title, so I'll just do a h1. We'll go a p tag of passing in the column dot title. And we're getting a error message here. Let's see what's going on with this. I think I need to wrap this in brackets. There we go. And we can see, sorry about it, just be sure that you wrap the columns in brackets so it is destructured, because it is an object the way it's being passed back from Mongoose, or excuse me, from MongoDB. So now you see we have first column listed on screen. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. We'll copy it. I'll delete it, and we'll place this in a new div, paste it in, and just give this a class name of padding on the top of 4. And just to see what it looks like, we'll go background purple 200. Let's refresh this. Yeah, see, my tailwind is acting up. It's not. Okay, it's fine. Let's test it out to make sure that we immediately see the next title of the column displayed once we click create. So we'll go second column, click new, and we see it immediately displayed there on screen. Perfect. So to finish out the CRUD capability, we need to have the ability to update and delete a the column in the event that we want to change the name or delete the column. And eventually we'll add the ability to um, drag and drop and add tasks within each column. But this is just a simple way to get us started. So I think what I'll do is add a form with the input field so that we have the ability to update it within this column, and we'll just have a input listed here, and we'll have an update button and a delete button. But first, let's go in and add the action that's going to give us this capability. So we'll go back to the action.ts file, and we'll create a export async function, and we'll name this update column. And this is going to be the function, as I mentioned, that we'll be using to update the actual column itself. Of course, we know we need to pass in some form data, and it's going to use the form data object. We'll then need to establish the connection to the database. So we'll go await DB connect. And there are some things we need to get back from the form in order to distinguish the column that we want to update and also what it is that we want to change about the column itself. So the first thing is going to be the ID. So we need to make sure that we pass that into the form. So we'll create a const name ID that'll be equal to form data.get. And what we'll be getting is the ID. And this is going to be passed as a string. We'll also need to get the title. And this is going to be form data as well. Be sure that you enclose this with parentheses, .get the title. And this will be as a string. And I'm going to add .trim just to make sure we don't get any blank data back from the user. And then inside of this function, just for some validation, we'll say if we don't get a ID, or if we don't get a title, we want to pass something back to the user just saying that, hey, this is not a valid input. Okay. Then now, if we do get good data, we do get an ID and we do get a title, we then want to proceed with updating the column. So we'll go await column, which is leveraging the model of the column itself. And we'll use the mongoose method of find by ID and update. So the first thing we'll need to pass in a couple parameters. The first parameter is going to be the ID itself. And the second parameter is going to be the title. So once we leverage this method, which is going to first find the column by the ID, which is the first parameter, and then what can be modified is the title itself, which is the second parameter. Once those updates have been made, we then can save it. And of course, we want to revalidate the data. So we'll use revalidate path. That way we can see the changes immediately. on the front end. So let's go ahead and save this file, and we'll go back to the page.tsx. Next, to get columns, let's add the function of update column. And then what we'll do in order to successfully, or in order to use that function, I'm just going to remove the title, and we'll keep the div with the ID, but we're going to add a form inside of that div, and I want to pass the action of update column. That's going to let us use the function that we just created. And then we know we need to pass two things to update column. The first is the ID. So we'll go input. We'll give this a type of text. We'll set the name to ID, and we'll say default value will be column._ID. Let's click save. And as you can see, the ID is now what's being displayed on screen. So we know that we're successfully passing the ID from the map columns to the form via the div that is wrapping the form. But we know that this isn't necessarily a great user experience to see an ID. No one, the user wouldn't care what the ID is. They just care about the field itself. So in order to successfully pass this in, what Next suggests to do is to make this a hidden field. So we're going to change the type to hidden so that the user doesn't see it. And then before I click save, I'm just going to go ahead and add a input field for the text itself. So we'll type input underneath it. We'll give it a type of text. The name of this is going to be title, and I'm gonna give it an ID of title as well. And we'll set the default value to column.title. And once I click save, what should happen is the ID should be hidden, and then we should see the title of the column on screen. So we'll click save. And then now we're right back where we started with first column, second column. And if I click, I have the ability to update this. So I see that I have an input field. So I have the ability to make changes to this. So the last thing we need to do in order to utilize the update column function is to add a button that's going to handle the submission of the update. So underneath the input, we'll add a button with a type of submit, and we'll just say updates. Click save, and we see we have the update button. Now let's see if we can add a little bit of styling to that. We'll go class name, border neutral. We'll go 200. Yeah, it's not GG. Yes, it's not working. It's okay. Not necessarily for this portion of the of what I'm doing. I'm just going to remove that for right now. Save it. So what should happen now is if I change this title, let's just say I add S's and I click update, it should immediately update the title of this column. So we'll click update, and we don't have any toast notifications or anything, so we don't see that whether it successfully took or not. But I'm just going to refresh the screen, and as you can see, the new title is showing. And we'll go back to our cluster, refresh this. You can see that we have 2 titles, which is perfect. And you can see the first title now has 2 S's after column, indicating that that title is a little unique because that's what we just changed. So we'll change the second one just to make sure that it is working. It stays second column. We'll say second column updated. Click update. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't give any, we don't have any notifications to let you know that it successfully went through. I don't have a loading indicator yet. But if we refresh the screen, you see that it is reading second column updated. And if we go to the database, you see second column is updated. Perfect. So the last thing that we want to do in order to complete out the crud functionality is add the ability to delete a column. And we'll add a delete button right here. But the first thing I want to do is create a function that's going to give us that capability. So in the action.ts file, we'll just create a function named delete column. Just going to add a note there so we can keep things somewhat structured and organized. Inside of this, or underneath that comment, we'll create an export async function named delete column. And then of course, this will need to get form data and be representing the form data object. First thing is always is to establish that DB connection. Then we'll create a const named ID because that's the only thing that we want to pass to the function in order to identify what column we wish to delete. And this will come in as a string. And then we'll have some validation just saying that if we don't get an ID, then we need to throw a new error back to the user indicating that invalid column. We don't need to tell the user it needs an ID. That's our responsibility to make sure that that portion works. And then if we do get an ID back, then we know we are in a position where we can identify the column and we'll have the ability to delete the column with no concern. So we will go ahead and utilize the database connection to find the column model. So we'll go await column dot find by ID and delete. And what we're going to pass in is the actual ID itself. And then once we pass in that ID, this mongoose method is going to take care of all the heavy lifting to actually find the column and delete it for us. So then we just want to revalidate the path to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information from the server. So I'm just going to click or add in revalidate path, and we want to revalidate the data on the actual home page itself. We'll save this file. And the next thing we want to do is utilize this function in order to have the ability to delete the column. So to make sure we don't get any hydration errors or anything, I think I'm going to pass this column, pass this form action. I think I could do it right here. Let's just see something. Form, we'll go input, and we'll add a button of delete, and the button to have a type of submit. Click save. Okay, so we don't get any errors, so that's good. And I have these two in the same div, so we'll just give it a class name of flex. Yeah, set the width pretty far apart, but that's okay. That's fine for right now. So then now let's go ahead and bring in the delete column function that we just created. And we'll pass that action to this form. So we'll go action, delete column. Then we will have a input with a ID of, so for this one, we want to give it an ID of ID. The name will be ID as well. We'll go type will be hidden because we don't want the user to see this. And we'll set the default value to call._ID. We'll click save. And once we click the delete button with this, we should immediately delete the column. So I'm gonna add another column. We'll go third column to delete, click new, it immediately appears, excuse me. And then now if we just click delete, we see that it immediately disappears. But let's test that to make sure that that worked. So we'll go delete column, make sure that it hit the database. We'll hit new column, go back to our database. I'll just refresh it. You see we have the third column that reads delete column. And then now if I delete it, it immediately disappears. And if we go back to the database, you see we're back down to 2 columns. So cool. That works as we intended. And with that, we've successfully created a simple CRUD application using Nextjs, the latest version, Mongoose to interact with our MongoDB database, and server actions to communicate with the server. So we'll come back and add a little more functionality. I actually want to make this into a clone project, but I wanted to just get this out so that you can see how simple it is to create a CRUD application using server actions with Nextjs. And we'll add a little more complexity with authentication and drag and drop features and all of that cool stuff later on. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, consider giving me a like and subscribing, and I will see you later on. Peace.